had to go out early this morning, and it's very rainy and chilly in Portland, Oregon, and I got absolutely soaked and really chilled to the bone. And so I came in and I got out of my wet clothes and I got a hot water bottle, and I was still cold, so I went and grabbed a wool shawl. I know people will ask, so this is the As You Wish pattern. It's one of the few knitting patterns I've actually paid for. I usually use free patterns off of Ravelry, or I write my own patterns. But this is a shawl that I made for my mother, 8 or 10 years ago. Every birthday and Christmas, I would knit my mother a shawl. So when she passed away, I inherited a very large collection of shawls that I had knitted. Some of them went to my sister. Some got donated to cancer support groups. But I kept, like maybe 8 of them. My mom's 2 favorite colors were cobalt blue and also this kind of mauvey pink. So even though I don't really wear pink, even though I'm wearing pink today, I don't usually wear pink, but I love the shawl. It makes me think of my mom. It still smells like her favorite hand lotion a little bit. It's this Crabtree and Evelyn peony scented hand lotion, and it still smells like that a little bit. I wanted to talk for a second about grief, because it was Thanksgiving week 5 years ago that my mother passed away from ovarian cancer. She actually had a really exceptionally rare type of ovarian cancer, primary peritoneal carcinoma, and I like to talk about it because I think it's important to raise awareness about this rare type of cancer. It's particularly aggressive. It is where you have ovarian cancer, but it doesn't originate in the ovaries. One of the causes of it, by the way, is thought to be asbestos contamination, either from ingesting asbestos or talcum powder. Which is one of the reasons that we don't use talcum powder, baby powder anymore, because a percentage of that talcum powder that was mined was contaminated with asbestos. We didn't have any family history of cancer before that. I had to get genetic testing actually afterward, which showed nothing. I still ended up getting a BSO. I had my ovaries and my fallopian tubes removed, which reduced my risk of getting ovarian cancer by 95%. Give me just a second here to go on a little bit more of a tangent. I'm going to talk about RFK Jr. more later today, because he's done a number of additionally terrible things this morning that we kind of knew were coming. But one of the things that I think about a lot is how RFK Jr. is one of the most dangerous people in the entire Trump regime. The choices that he's making, which are nonsensical, directly contradict good medical ethics, good medical practice. Those are going to kill millions of people. One of the first things that he did was roll back a lot of funding for cancer research. And also he dictated that Americans no longer need routine cancer screenings. There's not a single person in this country who has not been touched by cancer. You either have experienced it or you have a loved one who has experienced it. Literally, there is no American who is not touched by cancer. And so for the head of public health of the United States to decide that routine cancer screenings are not necessary, they're expensive for for-profit healthcare corporations, and we just don't need to have them. For him to roll back research for all kinds, it's not just RFK Jr., it's also Donald Trump and Elon Musk took away funding for all kinds of cancer research. It's really important. Setting us back decades. They're setting us back decades. They're actively killing people. I think about how my mother suffered with her very rare type of cancer and what important research needs to be done to fight for a cure. I also think about all of the ovarian cancer research that has helped women with other types of ovarian cancer, especially when it's caught earlier, be able to live long lives. And how just 10 or 15 years ago, that was not the case. We've had huge advancements in ovarian cancer treatment in the last couple of decades that not only saves women from a tremendous amount of needless suffering, it saves their lives. And RFK Jr. is, I understand that he's a eugenicist, and part of the plan is depopulation, and part of the plan is suffering and death. I understand that. But I can't think about losing my mother and live in 2025 America and not think about how many other families are going to suffer like my family suffered because of this regime. But also, having just marked the 5-year anniversary of my mother's passing, I wanted to take a second and talk about it because I've been having dreams about my mom. I still think about her almost every single day. I mean, in some ways, I can't not think about her. My house is full of her antiques and her table linens, things I made for her, photos of her. And we had a complicated relationship. I think a lot of people have complicated relationships with their parents, and that makes grief incredibly complicated. But when my mom passed, my friend Nacho said to me, you never really get over the death of your mom. basically like that's a grief that doesn't end. It changes, it shifts, it bubbles up at unexpected moments, but you never really get over it. My mother was a huge gardener. She was also basically like Martha Stewart. If Martha Stewart could cook a lot better. My mother was a domestic goddess and a consummate entertainer, an unbelievable cook, and just so skilled at everything she tried. There wasn't anything that she attempted that she couldn't do, and that can be very intimidating for a child. Also, there's no way my dad would have made it through medical school and been as successful as a physician if my mom had not been there behind him, helping him. I've talked about that before, right? My dad had pretty significant dyslexia, and my mom would read his medical textbooks to him. She would spell check his papers for him. I don't exactly know where I'm going with this. I just know I've been dreaming about my mother a lot lately. All of those complicated feelings have been surfacing the last couple of weeks, which I think, again, very normal, half a decade after her passing. And it has me thinking about how we think of grief as a discrete process that has an end date. Something, especially in America, grief is something that you get like 2 or 3 bereavement days and then you got to be right back at it. You're not allowed to process that grief, and we don't have realistic expectations of what the grieving process is, how we support people in that process, and how it's non-linear in many ways. It has ebbs and flows, and it is something that often stays with you, especially when it is somebody like your mother. It stays with you your entire life. Having lost my mom in 2020 in the middle of lockdown, the grief of her passing is inextricably linked to the grief of what we lost during COVID. And I feel it again now in the grief of having lost our democracy in 2025. I made a video a couple of months ago that was inspired by something that Possibility Maven said, by the way, one of the best accounts on TikTok, about how we don't have time and space to grieve. And so much of what we're going through right now, so much of our struggle to function well as we are resisting fascism, is that we are grieving, we are suppressing grief, we are unable to experience it in a natural, normal, healthy way. The grief of what we have lost, the grief of not only the potential future that we could have had if the election had gone differently, but the grief of having lost so many of our freedoms, the grief of having so much of our innocence stripped away from us. How do we find time? How do we make time to experience and process that very real grief? Because there's the grief of losing family members, and then there is a larger grief of what we are losing as a society, the collective loss that we are experiencing. And for so many people, like me, maybe like you, those things are happening at the same time. We have to process individual moments of grief, losing loved ones, but we are also going through this societal grief. And it adds so many layers of complexity. And it doesn't have to be a loved one that you lost recently, right? For me, 5 years later, there are moments where I'm going about my day and that grief of having lost my mother is just as fresh as it was in 2020. And I want to validate for you, if you feel that 2025 is a year that is just steeped in grief, that's a very normal thing to feel. And I don't know how to encourage you or help you access time and space to work through that grief. But I don't want you to feel that grief is a discrete process with an end and that you have to just get over it, that you're allowed to be sad for a couple of days and then you just got to move on. Because that's not what it's like, either when you lose an individual loved one or when you experience something like the loss of democracy, the loss of your innocence. I wanted to take a second here and read a little passage about embracing and honoring grief because I've found it to be helpful and relevant right now. It's by Julie Jelland, and the piece is entitled Navigating the Deep Soul Pain of Losing a Mother. Embracing and honoring grief. What I've learned about grief is that it needs to be accepted and honored, not rushed or suppressed, especially for those of us who feel deeply. I know that healing my mind, body, and spirit will take time, and I'm allowing myself the space to do so. I deeply miss our morning chats, sharing updates about the water birds and fish she loved visiting. I'm not placing expectations on myself, though. I'm allowing myself to cry when the emotions overwhelm me, to feel numb when I need to, and to experience every facet of this grief. I'm connecting to family and friends and spending time at the sea, which brings me healing and comfort. The journey of grief is a tender process, and I'm committed to honoring it with the patience and compassion it deserves.